Wake up every morning with just the news. All the news and none of the noise.
Good morning and welcome to Just the News AM. I'm Carrie Sheffield and so glad that you're with us. Well, there's been a lot happening overnight. We're going to get more into the Michigan hearing. There was Rudy Giuliani testifying. Jenna Ellis from the Trump campaign was there. A lot of testimony from poll watchers and firsthand witnesses of irregularities. We're going to get more into this later in the show, but in the meantime, I want to bring in Peter Rex. He's the CEO and founder of Rex, a tech entrepreneur, and he joins us from Austin. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning, Carrie. How you doing?
Doing well. So for our viewers, you wrote an op-ed for Fox Business and you outlined what you saw as a big problem here with bias in tech and problems around diversity of thought in the tech industry. And you outlined ways that you think that this issue can be solved. Our audience certainly has a lot of concerns with issues around perception of censorship, that certain viewpoints are not as popular as others and therefore suppressed on these tech platforms. And you went through three kind of principles that you outline as possible solutions. And first, you said that we need a diversity of thought. What do you mean by that?
I mean that when you're trying to figure out the truth and you're trying to figure out, where you stand on any issue, you need to hear a number of different opinions. It's one of the, I would say few good takeaways I had from law school at Harvard was, when you present to the judge, you present the best of both sides, and that allows the judge to figure out, which side they go on, even if it looks like, a very obvious decision. Someone always has a right to defense counsel, and they present the best argument for the other side. That way you can hear both opinions out. And I think that's something that's lacking in some of these centers that are the power centers currently for technology, Seattle and San Francisco, namely, where there's really a one-sided view and really only one view that's acceptable for debate. And that's a dangerous position that leads to leadership that is indoctrinated and sort of intolerant to other people.
Well, and so when I hear tech employees and what they say in response to what you just said is that, well, truth is truth. And so why should we give credence to the other side if it's just inherently wrong?
Well, I mean, truth is truth. If they do believe that, I'm glad about that. But what I would say is that for us as humans, we're very limited in our perspective as an individual. And for us to attain the truth, we need to hear opposing sides and hear different points of view. And we need to be trained a bit in reasoning. But at the very least, we need to hear different sides. And if we hear different sides, then we can allow our sensibilities, our intuition to kick in and discern which position is closer to the truth. And sometimes we can get dead on and hit the truth, but most times as humans, we're sort of grasping at the truth and trying to figure it out. And that's why it requires open debate and a diversity of opinions.
And secondly, you said that you want to invest in values-driven tech entrepreneurs. You said on another program that part of that was investing in Judeo-Christian entrepreneurs. So first, my question to that is that discrimination to say you're going to go for only specific people with specific religious worldviews? Is that discrimination of some kind? And then would that also possibly just leave value off the table or on the table if you're only going for certain people as opposed to the product itself should be the most efficient, best product, but you're going to be going for just a specific set or worldview? Wouldn't that be leaving value on the table, and is that a fiduciary issue?
Well, I think what I was talking about is more of a broader strategic look at the battlefield. And what I was pointing out here is that we need to have other positions, other leadership that have opposing viewpoints that are then become into leadership. So I highlighted Judeo-Christian as one of the ones that I think is somewhat missing from the battlefield of technology and the leadership. So I think it's important that we get some of those leaders into place. And that's a long type of investment cycle. That's a 10-year type vision where we start to cultivate leadership like this. But in the end of the day, it's business, right? When it comes to hiring, you hire for excellence, and that's it. But for the sake of America and for countries out there that are, all of them are exposed to tech, we need to have a diversity of opinions. And currently we don't. And I think one of the holes in that is we don't really have leadership that is committed to faith, family, and freedom. And I said, particularly Judeo-Christian backgrounds, or really, I would say not Judeo-Christian backgrounds so much as Judeo-Christian thinking and grounded in Judeo-Christian principles.
And so you're a devout Christian. Have you faced discrimination working in the tech industry?
Well, I think there's more of a soft type of discrimination of ideas where it's not as acceptable to have positions that are, opposing. But I would say for myself as a tech entrepreneur, I face resistance in different areas, and I sort of just use it as a challenge to keep powering through. But I think my bigger statement would just be that we have a bit of a vacuum of leadership there, and we need to step into that and create a leadership that's more friendly towards faith, family, and freedom, and people who are open to that.
Mm-hmm. And in your third principle, you said that we need to build alternative tech power structures, and you recently moved your company from Seattle to Austin. And the move, we're seeing many other companies who are moving out of California as well, in part because of the pandemic and seeing government structures in California very liberal, suppressing people from their perspective. Where are these other power centers? I would assume Austin is one of them because that's where you are. What other cities should we be looking for?
I mean, well, Austin's the place that we chose, but I mean, there's other cities that could be up for grabs to become a power center. And, I could list a few, but we could say, Boise, Idaho could be a spot. There's a number of other areas we considered. Salt Lake City, I think, is actually excellent. We actually considered Park City as well. But I think for me that what I look for and what I consider is valuable is you want to have a place where I mentioned faith, family, and freedom is flourishing, but at the same time, you don't want to have an insular view of even that. You don't even want to have a position where, as a Christian, I'm surrounded by a bunch of Christians. I want to be in a place where, yes, there are Christians, and that's a place that we can grow and cultivate our faith. Or if you're Jewish, the same thing, right? But we want to have people who disagree with us and actually are, maybe agnostic or atheist, but they're tolerant of us and they love us and we love them as well. That's a place that we want to be. And we felt that Austin offers that, where Austin has a very strong, contingent of liberals, and you also have conservatives as well. And you're within Texas, which values highly freedom, which I think is absolutely critical.
And real quick, do you think Section 230, real quick, 10 seconds, should Section 230 be repealed, the protections?
Well, I think specifically about that, and I did go to Harvard Law School, but there's a lot smarter people who know a lot more about policy than I do. What I would talk about is the bigger picture, more strategic problem, which is we can do that and we need to do something regulatory. I would caution about doing too much, though, because sometimes you could do regulations and you then
right.
you put at a disadvantage.
We got to leave it right there. Thank you, Peter Rex. We appreciate it. Good morning and welcome back to Just the News AM. I'm Carrie Sheffield. We're giving you all the coverage of the challenges around the 2020 election and the Trump campaign's efforts on this. I want to bring in Tom Fitton. He's president of Judicial Watch. He's also author of A Republic Under Assault, and it's subtitled The Left's Ongoing Attack on American Freedom. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So, Tom, I want to let our viewers know about a study that you all did looking at what you guys called ghost voters. And what you found, we'll put the tweet up, you found a study that you all did shows that 1.8 million excess or ghost voters in 353 counties across 29 states. The data highlights the recklessness of mailing blindly ballots or ballot applications to voter registration lists. This is a huge number. First of all, walk us through how this happened and could this have made the difference? Are these people who are basically not existing or they're not allowed to vote?
You have a voter registration list, right? And it has 100 people. And in many counties, you have voter registration lists that have, you've got a voter registration list with 105 people. But essentially, the records show, according to the census, you got 100 people living there and eligible to vote. So we've got hundreds of counties in just 29 states, and we weren't able to get all the data across all the states where you got more people on the rolls than are living there and eligible to vote. So those extra names are usually people who have moved away or died, meaning they're either living in another state or they're otherwise ineligible because they ain't living in this world anymore. So when you've got states with extra names on the rolls, that's an indication the rolls are dirty, obviously, and you really shouldn't rely on them, in my view, to be targeting mail-in ballots with and just casually pretending that accepting ballots essentially from this list that's been not cleaned is good practice.
So, and do we have a sense of how many of those 1.8 million people ended up voting?
Oh, not yet. I mean, that's the sort of, maybe the Justice Department can investigate that. You know, we've got allegations in Nevada, for instance, in Clark County, Clark County, we know there are 154,000 extra names on the rolls in Clark County, Nevada alone, and that's Las Vegas. There's a lawsuit that suggests that there were 15,000 out-of-state voters in Nevada alone. In Michigan, we looked at more recent data, 654,000 extra names on the rolls in Michigan. Georgia's a mess. Pennsylvania, we have a lawsuit to clean up the rolls. Our lawsuit alleges over 800 extra thousand names on the rolls there. So this is an issue that potentially impacts the election in the sense that you've got dirty election rolls and they're being mailed ballots and ballot applications, and it's just a horrible way to maintain election integrity. To use these lists the way they've been used to mail-in balloting.
And you just mentioned the Department of Justice. The Attorney General, William Barr, has said, he told the Associated Press, according to their report, that there was no evidence of substantial fraud enough to change the election. But you haven't seen the DOJ investigating what you're talking about here. You've identified 1.8 million people potentially who could have voted that should not have been voting. So have you been in touch with the DOJ? Has Judicial Watch?
Well, just to be clear, I'm not sure that they could have voted. I'm not sure if they did vote.
Potentially the potential of 1.8 million.
The Justice Department's been AWOL on this issue. They've known about dirty voting lists across the country for years. This Justice Department hasn't lifted their fingers, virtually done nothing to help us clean up the rolls. I don't know who Attorney General Barr is listening to over at the Justice Department. Our experience is those responsible for investigating these sorts of issues are left-wing Democrat partisans who have zero interest in enforcing the rule of law on election integrity and voter fraud. So Attorney General Barr is probably getting bad information, and that's the most charitable interpretation, I suppose. But it's the most likely one. The deep state is never going to admit there's a problem here.
I want to turn to another topic from your organization. So Judicial Watch looked at you dug and you got some information about the Obama Department of Homeland Security reportedly scanning the Georgia election site illegally. And you have the governor, Brian Kemp, accusing of an unsuccessful attempt to penetrate the Georgia Secretary of State's firewall. This is really remarkable that you have this allegation. What more should our viewers know about this, and will there be any accountability?
Well, this was the DHS under Barack Obama in 2016. That back then, I think Governor Kemp was Secretary of State Kemp, and he went after the Justice Department after, I guess, his own security measures figured out that DHS was improperly scanning their material or doing something that generated a security warning. And we have the document showing, yes, he had a right to be concerned because they were doing something that was highly unusual, according to the records we were able to uncover from the Department of Homeland Security directly. And not only that, but it looks like some of the logs and documents that could tell us what was going on were overwritten. So there's some additional questions I think deserve further investigation. Now, of course, the IG pretended nothing was improper here, but I suggest your viewers look at the documents themselves at judicialwatch.org and ask why it is the Obama DHS, under the guise of trying to protect our elections, were snooping around election sites of the states without their knowledge or forewarning.
Well, we hope our viewers do check this out. Tom, what do you think is not being told just overall with this story of the 2020 election and these allegations of voter fraud?
I think the elections in these battleground states, the use of mail-in balloting, undermine fundamentally the election integrity. And we have the change in state rules and state laws, often unconstitutionally done, and that further undermine election security. And so in these battleground states where these rules were changed in a way that makes it almost impossible to know whether ballots were appropriately counted one way or the other or not, the state legislatures need to step in. You don't need to prove that computer systems were manipulated. It's really much more simple. They had rules, they changed them, and the changes were in violation of law. So therefore, many, many votes need to be discounted and ruled ineligible because of this misconduct. And this is what I think the president is hanging his hat on, and I think he's right to raise the issues.
All right, Tom Fitton, president of Judicial Watch, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And stay with us. We have Tom Spencer, a legal expert, to talk about a congressman who yesterday says that he's going to challenge the Electoral College in January to block the certification of Joe Biden. What does this mean constitutionally? Stay tuned. We'll bring it right to you. Hey there, good morning, and welcome back to Just the News AM. I'm Carrie Sheffield. Glad you're with us. Let's play some tape from last night. We had the president making a statement without any advance warning. He dropped it on social media. It had been pre-recorded. Let's play a highlight from that real quick.
Thank you. This may be the most important speech I've ever made. I want to provide an update on our ongoing efforts to expose the tremendous voter fraud and irregularities which took place during the ridiculously long November 3rd elections. We used to have what was called Election Day. Now we have election days, weeks and months, and lots of bad things happened during this ridiculous period of time, especially when you have to prove almost nothing to exercise our greatest privilege, the right to vote. As president, I have no higher duty than to defend the laws and the Constitution of the United States. That is why I am determined to protect our election system, which is now under coordinated assault and siege. For months leading up to the presidential election, we were warned that we should not declare a premature victory. We were told repeatedly that it would take weeks, if not months, to determine the winner, to count the absentee ballots, and to verify the results. My opponent was told to stay away from the election. Don't campaign. We don't need you. We've got it. This election is done. In fact, they were acting like they already knew what the outcome was going to be. They had it covered, and perhaps they did, very sadly for our country. It was all very, very strange. Within days after the election, we witnessed an orchestrated effort to anoint a winner, even while many key states were still being counted. The constitutional process must be allowed to continue. We are going to defend the honesty of the vote by ensuring that every legal ballot is counted and that no illegal ballot is counted. This is not just about honoring the votes of 74 million Americans who voted for me. It's about ensuring that Americans can have faith in this election and in all future elections.
And there you have the president being defiant and saying that he's going to continue fighting this issue of election integrity. You have one of his allies in Congress who spoke out, according to a Politico report. He's a congressman from Alabama. We covered it here at Just the News. His name is Mo Brooks, and he says that he plans to challenge the Electoral College vote on January 6th. This is when the new Congress would be in session in January. He says that this election was stolen by the socialists engaging in an extraordinary voter fraud and election theft measures. So the big question is, first, does he have any shot at this? Because he needs to find a colleague over on the Senate side to join him in this effort. But I want to see constitutionally what this all means. And joining me to break it all down is Tom Spencer. He's vice president for the Lawyers Democracy Fund. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning.
So tell us, does this congressman have any shot? This is a House that's going to be led by Democrats, by Nancy Pelosi. What's the deal here constitutionally?
Yes, he does have a shot. And, he's a brave guy, and you got to hand it to him. There are people who have done this, and this is not an unusual move. I mean, Maxine Waters during the 2000 election afterwards did the same exact thing, went on the House. She could not find a senatorial colleague to also start the discussion procedure under the Constitution. So he has a shot, and I think that it's healthy for the American system, for Americans to see that we have a procedure to deal with these kinds of problems. This was a lawless election, and there are plenty of issues floating out here, and Americans have to have confidence, and right now they don't.
So walk us through what would happen then. Let's say hypothetically, maybe he gets a Tom Cotton or a Ted Cruz or some other Republican on the Senate side to work with him. What would then happen? And again, he's in the minority here in the new Congress as a Republican. Would the House Democrats block him, or what would happen next?
Yes, what would happen next is that under the Constitution and under the procedures, they would go into a discussion methodology. And I think it's a limit of about 2 hours for debate. And then they take a vote. And each state has one vote on the Electoral College, and that they make a decision, and that's the end of it. That's the end of the procedure.
So this is the procedure that sometimes has been known as a contingent election. Are you saying that he could call a contingent election and have it be conducted just through this way?
Yeah, I mean, each representative has that right, and they could have a discussion under the Constitution. Their procedure is 2 hours, and then they'll call a vote, and it's happened before. And it happened in 2001, it happened in 2005, it happened in 2017. Almost all the time, it doesn't go anywhere. And it probably won't this time just based on mathematics. But it's, I got to hand it to him, and, good for him. He's doing the right thing. And, the Democrats who did it before in 2001, 2005, 2017, et cetera, it was their right to do it. We've got a constitution. We've got to follow it.
And there have been legislatures in Michigan. We just saw the hearing in Pennsylvania. We saw another hearing last week in Arizona. Elsewhere around the country, there are Republican-led legislatures that are calling this into question. Do you think that, first, would this be the more likely scenario if Trump is able to pull out a victory? Would it happen at the legislative level? What are their powers?
Well, their powers are that under the Constitution, they have the right to designate a slate of electors. There, in some states, there are laws which relate to whether or not the governor can also appoint electors. This happened in Rutherford B. Hayes' election, where there were competing electors, and the House of Representatives, the U.S. House of Representatives, is the sole judge of which electors are the valid electors for that particular state.
So then going back to this congressional strategy, if Congressman Mo Brooks, and he's going to be coming on our program next week, do you think he'll be successful in getting a senator to challenge this with him?
I hope so. That way there could be a full debate on the issue and a vote taken in the new House of Representatives. And every senator and every member of the House of Representatives can go on record either affirming or disaffirming this wild election procedure that we just had. I think the people are owed a vote by every member of Congress. Do they believe that this was a lawful election, and or do they believe that there are issues that cast the results of this election into doubt? And I think that former Vice President Biden is owed a vote, a full vote in the House of Representatives on this issue, so that this issue doesn't cast an aspersion over his entire 4 years like they did to President Trump.
All right, Tom Spencer with the Lawyers Democracy Fund. We appreciate it.
Not at all. My pleasure. Always.
And stay with us. We've got Monica Crowley from the U.S. Treasury Department to talk about the stimulus plan. Stay with us. Good morning and welcome back here to Just the News AM. We are going to talk about stimulus and what might be happening out of Congress and out of the White House. Joining me is Monica Crowley, a spokeswoman for the Treasury Department. Good morning, Monica. Welcome back.
Good morning, Carrie. Always great to be here.
So let's talk about this quote unquote skinny bundle. So Democrats previously had really been digging in their heels and saying they wanted maybe $2 or $3 trillion in a stimulus package. Now we're seeing, we've just been covering here, my colleague Nicholas Balassi, that a package of about $908 billion, a relief package framework, is looking very possible that it could pass. And you have some Democrats who are starting to say they're going to be coming on board there. Is this the price tag that's going to be more likely that's going to be passed here before the end of the year?
Well, just as we have seen over the last several months, when there developed a consensus view that more economic relief was in fact necessary, this process is very fluid. It remains very fluid. Secretary Mnuchin was on the Hill yesterday. As you know, he is essentially the lead negotiator for the administration on stimulus. And he was saying that he was very thankful that this bipartisan group came forward with this $908 billion proposal. And it was a great starting out point for the continuing negotiations. I think that the administration has always remained prepared to achieve a bipartisan agreement, again, an agreement that could pass both houses of Congress with bipartisan support. And as strong as a recovery as we have seen, and Carrie, this is the fastest economic recovery from any crisis in American history, there is a view that we need a targeted relief bill to address those sectors of the economy and those Americans who are still hurting. So the hope is now, with the election behind us and politics at least a little bit in abeyance, that we might be able to achieve some sort of agreement in the next week or so.
And in terms of people who are fiscal hawks, people who are saying our deficit is already ballooning out of control and we've already spent trillions of dollars to date, what's your response to them who say this is going to be layered on the shoulders of future generations, that the recovery is real, that maybe it's not necessary?
Well, as the president and Secretary Mnuchin and others on the economic team have repeatedly said, this novel coronavirus hit us like a brick wall, and it is the equivalent of a war. And so when you're in a war, you have to spend what is necessary to defeat your enemy. And in this case, it is an invisible enemy of the virus. And we're making huge strides in terms of therapeutics. And now we have a number of vaccines on the horizon as well. Unfortunately, it's also had a major impact economically, both here and around the world. And the president has said that he is not going to rest until every American is back to work. Now, the good news is that most so-called experts expected that we would not fall below the 8% unemployment rate level until the end of next year. And here we are at 6.9%. We're getting new jobs numbers, the November jobs report tomorrow morning, and the experts say that we should be at about 6.8%. So we're moving in the right direction very quickly, but there's still Americans who are on long-term unemployment insurance. They've lost their jobs through no fault of their own. And this administration, this president, wants to do everything possible to get them back to work and give them the assistance that they need in the meantime.
And I want to turn to a topic that's been covered in the news about your boss and his defense of a shutdown of a federal emergency loan programs. This was leftover money from the CARES Act. He said that the $455 billion allocated for these federal loan programs could be better used elsewhere if Congress moved the funds into relief programs for small businesses and unemployed workers. So he was saying that these loans have not been utilized very heavily by bigger corporations. This money, is he saying that this money should just not be used, or should this be rolled over into this $908 billion package, so that's where it's going instead? Or what's going to happen with this money?
So at the beginning of the crisis, Carrie, we had an understanding that not only did we need the fiscal support, but we also needed monetary stimulus. And that's where Treasury and Fed worked together very closely to stand up 13 unique 13.3 facilities. These are the lending facilities that you just cited. And while they have been successful over the last many months since this crisis began, what we've seen is that there's limited uptake on these. So they've been successful for the companies, small, big, and medium size that they were geared for. We have also seen very limited utility to them. So you've got about $455 billion not utilized. The markets are now functioning smoothly and in a very healthy kind of way. So out of abundance of caution, the Secretary extended several of these facilities for 90 days into about March. But for the others, we're going to terminate them because that was the congressional intent. My boss, Secretary Mnuchin, basically moved into Capitol Hill in March and negotiated the CARES Act. So the facilities that are using CARES Act funds, the members of Congress who work with the Secretary in writing the actual legislative language, that intent was that these facilities sunset on December 31st. We did not want fiscal stimulus then to morph into monetary and vice versa. So the congressional intent is clear that they are to sunset on December 31st. So the Secretary is executing that. And then he is making the argument that you have $455 billion of unutilized funds plus an additional $130 billion of unutilized paycheck protection money for small businesses for a grand total of about $600 billion that can be easily rolled over, reallocated through congressional action for small businesses and other targeted economic relief. It's a very logical, common sense argument. We'll see what Capitol Hill does with it.
All right, Monica Crowley with Treasury, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Stay with us. We've got Jeremy Frankel coming up next. Morning and welcome back here to Just the News AM. I'm Carrie Sheffield and glad you're here. Let's turn to the hearing that happened yesterday in Michigan. I want to give you a highlight. Let's roll that tape and then I want to bring in Jeremy Frankel, conservative commentator on the other side.
The ballot came across the adjudication screen where this voter had voted for Joe Biden and the Green Party presidential candidate, and she gave the vote to Joe Biden. I also saw the ballot show up in the middle of the night. Also, I inquired about the tabulation numbers from the tabulation machine between shift changes. I was denied that information. We saw a lot of irregular things. This is not an anomaly. Just because all of us have different accounts of what we saw, that doesn't make them invalid. And to expect Secretary Benson to actually do something about it is foolhardy. To accept Dan and Essel to do anything about it would be foolhardy. So we're appealing to you guys to do something about it. Because if our elections aren't fair, then we have no republic left. It's a banana republic. We have nothing. And we don't trust the election process. Why do you think a lot of people don't vote? Because they feel it's the big fraud. So our claims are being dismissed. I mean, Secretary Benson dismissed us before she did any investigation. So clearly she can't be trusted to do her job. It's not our job to conduct an investigation. There are paid officials who are to do that. And we're imploring you guys to please step up and listen to us and investigate our claims. Check us out. Don't just take our word. Investigate what we had to say, because we have nothing left. Thank you.
There's a testimony at the Michigan legislative hearing about this issue of voter fraud. Jeremy Frankel is a contributor to Town Hall, and he joins me now. Good morning, Jeremy. So I don't think we've got your audio, but let's keep talking here. I want to get your take. We just heard from a legal expert who said that Congressman Mo Brooks, who said yesterday that he plans in January to contest the electors and say that they should not be voting for Joe Biden. And he said he's looking for a Senate colleague. He said he's going to do it regardless of whether or not he gets a Senate colleague to help him to challenge this. But the legal expert said that there's a very real chance that Trump could win if this goes to what's called a contingent election. Is this the end game, Jeremy? What do you think?
There definitely is that part of an end game, because if you see a lot of these hearings, it seems that the end game is to get these legislators in these contested swing states to realize that there's so much tainted and so many irregularities that have gone on in this election, such as ballot dumps, putting pizza boxes over windows, and throwing the poll watchers out. And you've seen all these testimony from so many different groups, so many different people all throughout these swing states. These people have put everything on the line in sworn affidavits and could go to prison if they're proven wrong. They have nothing to gain from doing this other than showing election integrity. And so what would happen is, theoretically, if these state legislators don't send electors, or if the House doesn't accept the electors based on that, that would put Joe Biden under the 269. And then the election would go straight to the House with some debate, etc. And then the House would theoretically elect President Trump, because the Republicans, even though they don't have the actual House majority, they have the majority of state delegations. And what that means is that, for example, let's say California has a certain amount of representatives, and smaller states such as Rhode Island has a certain amount of representatives. They each count as one. Republicans have, I believe it's a 28-22 majority, if I'm not mistaken. And so that would mean that President Trump would just win based on that.
Do you think that enough Republicans, because, I mean, the president had, depending on your poll, 90 to 95% approval rating among Republicans. Do you think that will translate to 90 to 95% of Republicans in the House and in the Senate who would, it would be the House voting, who would say that they want this, that they would want to overrule what the Electoral College decides?
So I don't think anybody wants it. I mean, in the end, nobody wants an election that is so complicated, but they brought this on themselves. They brought this on themselves by bringing all these lawsuits throughout the last 90 days, throughout the last 6 months, to especially in Pennsylvania, when they brought them all to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, which is overrun by Democrats, and changing that the election would basically be allowed to be going on until November 6th regarding mail-in ballots, non-verifying signatures, etc. And they brought this on themselves. So I would hope so. I would hope that they would do their constitutional duty, which is in Article 2. That is what they're supposed to do. So if it gets to that point, I absolutely could see it happening.
All right, let's turn to another topic that you write a lot about, which is Iran and Israel. So Iran said that they voted in favor of suspending UN inspections of the country's nuclear facilities. This effort comes as Democrat Joe Biden considers having the U.S. rejoin the 2015 nuclear accord with Iran. Do you think that Iran, by doing this, by saying they want to kick out UN inspectors, do they feel like they're emboldened at the prospect of a Democrat Joe Biden in the White House?
It seems that way. However, I would also say that they're desperate. I mean, their nuclear scientist of 20 years was just assassinated by Mossad in something beyond heroic. The fact that none of these assassins were caught or killed were killed by that, and that their country has been decimated over the last couple of years, especially now that the Iran nuclear deal has been put away, and they've been cut under by sanctions and by coronavirus, and especially with the Abraham Accords. All of these other Arab Gulf states are now partnered with Israel with this common enemy. They're desperate. They're very much teetering on the brink of collapse. And I think even if Joe Biden wanted to bring back the Iran deal, I don't know if the actual environment would allow it to be done because of all these alliances between these Arab states and Israel.
All right, Jeremy Frankel, we appreciate your perspective.
Thank you so much.
Jeremy's a political contributor and commentator for townhall.com. Stay with us, folks. We will be right back. Hey there, good morning, and welcome back to Just the News AM. I want to close out the show with some positive news. We just put it on our website. This is the new job reports. The job report is showing that the first-time U.S. claims fell to their lowest point since the pandemic began to 712,000. Now, this was a drop from 718,000 in the previous week. This is according to the Labor Department. And the figure, however, though, before we get too excited, is actually way higher than what it was before the pandemic hit, which was around 225,000. So there is a lot to do to catch up, more than 500,000 increase there since the pandemic began. However, this is a positive move in the right direction to say things got really, really bad in March, and now we are clawing our way out of this hole. We are making progress. Now, there was an analyst with CNBC that said part of why he thinks this number fell was because of the Thanksgiving holiday, that people were busy and tied up with families, so that's part of why they weren't filing for the claims. So he expects that it's going to bump up again next week to about 800,000. So we'll keep an eye out for all of that, of course, although we did have the White House chief economist yesterday saying that he expects that this holiday season is going to be robust. So hopefully this number is going to keep creeping down, keep going low. We're, of course, going to keep you posted on all of this. And thank you for joining us here on this ride. I want you to stay tuned here, as always, on Real America's Voice, because War Room is coming up next with Steve Bannon, Raheem Kassam, and the whole crew. You guys don't miss it.